Facebook stock absolutely crushed, down around 70%, causing some investors to wonder, will it recover? Well, Michael Burry, arguably one of the greatest investors of all time, he's chiming in on Facebook/Meta. So I will talk about his recent posts. I will also share my thoughts on the different paths that Facebook may have in the years ahead. One where you're talking about potentially hundreds of percent upside. The others are rocky roads. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Daniel. You're watching Unrivaled Investing. If you enjoy educational investment videos, please make a point of hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button. So let's understand what Michael Burry has to say. Well, first, he actually used to own Facebook/Meta stock. He owned around $18 million in the first quarter of 2022. He subsequently blew out of most of it because he was concerned about the broader macro environment, particularly with rising interest rates, Fed policy tightening, resulting in potentially lower valuations. And we haven't even seen the second shoe to drop, which is arguably lower earnings. So far, you've just seen valuation compression. You haven't seen earnings compression yet, which could be another leg lower. So he wisely blew out of it after his owning it in the first quarter of 2022, so arguably missed a lot of the downside, saving himself. So what has he had to say about Facebook, or Zuck in particular? He said Zuck is an FLK ASD guy. I did not know what this was, so I had to look it up. FLK is funny looking kid, and ASD is autism spectrum disorder. So he's saying Zuck is on the spectrum, but he goes, so am I. I get it, but I know what I am and my obsessive interest in life. Dog species, building guitars, building computers, always pained me because I recognize their uselessness. If you don't know, it doesn't pain you, but pains others. And so it is. So what is he saying? So he's saying that Zuck is on the spectrum and he doesn't even realize that he's on the spectrum. And so he has this obsessive focus over Meta, changing the company's name, putting in $10 billion. This is a huge mega bet. I mean, think about allocating, let's say $50 billion over 5 years to something where it's like, hey, I don't even have legs type of thing. And it's just monumental. And he's saying, well, when you're on the spectrum, you can get hyper focused on things that are useless. And he's effectively saying Zuck is focused on something that's useless. He's saying that Reality Labs might prove to be useless. And we'll talk about what the numbers suggest so far. And if you don't know you're on the spectrum, you don't know you're focusing on something useless, it doesn't pain you, because it's like, hey, I'm going to build guitars and I'm just focused on that. But if you're aware of it, then it does sort of pain you, and then you change your behavior, at least in theory. And so that's, so he's calling that out there. He also adds, do we have another couple Elon Musks, who can do to Meta and Google what Elon Musk is about to do to Twitter? Now, here he's obviously talking about Elon Musk's recent purchase of Twitter, where I think it's really two different comments. One is, hey, let's cut all the fat out of these mega advertising businesses because they could be incredibly lucrative. So come in there who has a 0-day approach and say, what do we actually need to run this business extremely well? So Elon Musk is arguably doing that right now. We will see. I think the range of possibilities for Twitter is quite wide, where you could see Twitter in bankruptcy in like a year ahead, or you can see it like where it's just a tremendous, it had a tremendous revolution. So we will see. I'm very curious to see how that plays out. But I think he's also making the call that Twitter's exploring additional paths to monetization. For example, recently Elon Musk has been talking about $8 for all in terms of getting your blue check mark. He talks about how Twitter's current lords and peasant systems for who has or who doesn't have a blue check mark is BS. Power the people, but for $8 a month. So he's trying to encourage people to sign up for $8 a month to kill the spam, to kill the bots. And he's also saying, hey, maybe this could be a way to reward content creators as well, to have some sort of revenue share because, you'll be working with publishers. Ultimately saying, hey, if this is what Musk is doing with Twitter, is there something that Facebook can do that's, let's say, in addition to advertising or different approaches towards monetization? Well, I would argue Zuck is already very, very clever with trying to figure out new ways to monetization. For example, in the most recent call, they were talking about click-to-messaging ads, which lets businesses run ads on Facebook and Instagram that start a thread on Messenger, WhatsApp, or Instagram Direct, so customers can communicate directly, or businesses can communicate directly with customers directly. And this is one of our fastest growing ads products with 9 billion annual run rate. They also talk about how, what the effectively the click to ad on WhatsApp or the click to talk on WhatsApp just passed 1.5 billion, growing 80% year over year. So they have explored really clever products. And this effectively click to messaging ads, already $9 billion. This is already almost double Twitter's size. So that's just a point of reference for what they're doing effectively through their messenger app. The question is, what happens to Facebook? What happens to Meta stock from here? First, if you're looking to take charge of your investment journey, consider unrivaledinvesting.com for compelling investment ideas, real-time portfolio updates, and our exclusive Discord server available for annual subscribers. In full disclosure, this is not financial advice. I do own a teaser position in Facebook stock. I have trimmed it a bit, through my journey. At one point, it was a larger position, but I did trim it when I sort of saw the different paths ahead. So let's talk about the types of paths. One of which is that their reality labs, their meta bets start working out. At this point, I'd argue they have a lot of cool tech, but it's not really showing up in the numbers. It's not really showing up with the traction where you can see their revenue in reality labs actually declined meaningfully year over year. Now, this is probably due to the timing of new, systems issuances, and they'll come out with new products for the Oculus, and then it'll be bumpy. But overall, it's still immaterial. Like even if you ignore the fact that it declined significantly from around 600 million to around 300 million in the quarter, and their core advertising business is closer to 30 billion. I mean, you're looking at like 1% of the business, 2% of the business. Like, it's immaterial at this point, and it's solidly detracting from the fundamental value. And so I think, at this point, there really are very few signs of it taking off in the way that you saw, let's say, Facebook in early days, where it's like, hey, it might only be $100 million revenue, but it's growing at 100%. You're not even seeing that now, and you're just seeing this monster bet. So the return on investment, isn't there. It's just sort of like, hypothetically, maybe it's there in the future. And by the way, what's the risk that Zuck does all these things to sort of get something to marketplace, and it turns out to be the MySpace equivalent, and then maybe Apple swoops in with an upgraded product that just looks cooler and they win, or it's because their ecosystem, and they don't have to do this $50 billion bet. They sort of say, oh, this is interesting what they've done. Let's sort of try our own version of it. So I look at this and I think one way that this stock could re-rate is if they spun off Reality Labs. They could take their 40 billion in cash, put it to Reality Labs and say, hey, this is now a separate organization. If this does not get enough traction over the next 3 to 4 or 5 years, this is it. And it's separate from, let's say, the core advertising business. So we'll see, what happens. At this point, it's extremely unlikely that they'll do it. I think another very real path, and this is sort of the path of maximum pain for Meta, and this is part of the reason why it's not a huge position for me, it's a teaser position, is I think you're going to have a recession. You're starting to see that data. And Facebook, which has historically been just a complete cash cow, historically generating close to $10 billion in a given quarter, most recently generated only $200 million. And they're talking about accelerating some of their investments next year. So I think what you see is a potential recession where they move into a cash burn. And when you're in a cash burn, I think that's going to be a crap your pants moment for Zuck, where he goes, whoa, it's stinky. What am I going to do here? And he's going to find religion in that moment. And at that point, it's sort of saying, I need to make some tough choices about the vision of my company, because there's a chance that I'm risking the whole thing over this bet. I'm risking this, this cash cow of an advertising business because I'm burning so much cash with Reality Labs. And what would normally be a cash cow is in the short term being impacted by a recession. And so do you want to make sure you survive to another day, or are you going all in because you have this vision? And so I think Zuck finds religion in that moment. I think that's the point where it's just, you see the massive layoffs. You see that his vision gets scaled back dramatically. And potentially even, he brings on a new CEO. Maybe you have something like that where he's sort of chastised and said, okay, I'm going to step back to sort of a chair role, talk about the broader vision. But in terms of actually allocating these bets, sort of recognizing how off the rails he's gone. And that's a real possibility. Now, keep in mind, if he's successful with Reality Labs, which I'd argue the indications are very limited at this point, then I hope, I get to eat my words, and that, and I'll call out and I'll say I was wrong. But at this point, the most likely path, in my opinion, is you see a recession, you see huge cash burn, the stock absolutely craps the bed, and he's sort of saying at that point, wait a second, this cash burn isn't sustainable. What am I going to do to put us on a sustainable path? Like, where do we go from here? And I think at that point, you are looking at a much better outcome because there's more intelligent capital allocation. I think another possibility, this is one of the roads that are actually quite pleasant, is that you wake up and the U.S. government has done you a solid. You talk about FCC Commissioner Carr, I think, saying, look, I don't believe there's a path forward for anything other than a ban when he's talking about TickTock. He said there simply isn't a world in which you could come up with sufficient protection on the data that you could have sufficient confidence that it's not finding its way back into the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. Now, in recent quarters, Zuck has called out TikTok, effectively saying, yeah, we have been losing share to TikTok, effectively engagement with users, and if users aren't engaged, they're losing advertising revenue. In the most recent quarter, they said, yeah, we started winning back that market share. But this past year, it has been a thorn in their side. If you have the U.S. government step in, do them a solid, maybe, Zuck's paid off enough senators, congressmen, I believe, in America, to effectively ban TikTok. Do you have that 20-40% jump in Facebook or Meta stock in a very short order? I bet you could see something like that with the setup here, where if you saw actually Congress moving to ban it, then you could see just a huge rally in Meta stock. So we'll see. That's sort of like a call option. Now, when I think about the core business of Facebook/Meta, I'm looking at a business that's still increasing, still growing over time, still very solid. And it's down from the last time I did a video talking about their third quarter earnings. It's down further. So it's gone from like 7 times free cash flow to 6 times. Now, when I say free cash flow, I'm talking about peak free cash flow, what they did in 2021 of around $40 billion, currently trades a little under $260 billion. So I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking if they're able to get back to their prior free cash flows, you are talking about, easily 100% upside, maybe closer to 400% upside over 5 years. So that is dramatic upside potential for Facebook if they're able to survive the coming year or two, where effectively that means they survive a recession, they don't blow up with Reality Labs, and they also are able to sort of continue to compete against, the new, maybe either Twitter becomes more competitive or they just, successfully beat out TikTok. So I'm very curious to see how that plays out. That asymmetry is why I own a teaser position. That said, I don't have a high degree of confidence, partly because, as Michael Burry suggested, it seems like Zuck isn't even aware of the problem. That he's just sort of saying, hey, I'm going all in on this. And it's just like, Michael Burry saying, hey, I'm on the spectrum, so I will do these sort of useless things that I'm just obsessively focusing on, such as building my own guitars. I recognize that it's not really useful, but it's just something that I just focus on, or knowing dog species. Like, hey, that really lights me up. Hey, to everyone to each his own. You live your own, you only live once, find things that you enjoy. But if you like obsessively put all your resources to it, and you can name every dog species and that's what you're living for, maybe you want to go home and rethink your life. That's sort of the challenge. And I think what Michael Burry is saying is, yeah, Zuckerberg hasn't had that finding religion moment. He hasn't had that moment where he goes, okay, this was a crazy bet, but we're going to fix this. And if we fix this, then you're talking about huge dramatic upside. And so far what I'm seeing is recessionary pressures. I'm seeing that from a variety of different companies, Apple, Amazon, a lot of different companies, talking about global macroeconomic pressures increasing. I view this as just starting. The interest rates have moved up and you're just starting to see that flow through the economy. So I think you're going to see worse results for Facebook. And when that happens, the challenge of, hey, what do we do with increasing cash burn? And so I think very bumpy ride potentially, but maybe you wake up one day and you find out, woohoo, TikTok's been banned, Meta's up 40%. So very curious to see how it plays out from here. If you have thoughts on Meta or Facebook stock, please make a point of sharing them below. Please make a point of hitting that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching Unrivaled Investing.